For weeks, heat waves have baked large parts of China. Egg fry on Shanghai Street. But wait, would it cook quicker in Xinjiang, Fujian, or Chongqing? People post online their tips to escape the heat. Over 30 counties and cities covering an area of 3.64 million square meters report their highest temperatures ever. Parts of Hebei, Shanxi, and Xinjiang see temperatures hit 40 to 42 degrees. In the capital, Beijing, electricity consumption also sees the new heights, with air conditioning eating up 52% of all usage. Local firefighting brigades work to prevent fires by removing hazards. The public is also warned to protect themselves, take cautions against the heat.
There have been spectacular storms across China, bringing some relief from days of scorching summer heat. For several hours, lightning lit up the Beijing skies and also struck several areas on the ground. Gale force winds also wreaked havoc. Doors at Chunlixu railway station were smashed and some passengers were blown off their feet. In other parts of the city, some onlookers kept their cool as a rooftop object fell at their feet while they filmed the thunderstorm. The heavy rainfall, which lasted about 2 hours, also caused severe travel disruption in Beijing, a number of power outages, and left many streets submerged.
The rains in the Indian state of Assam have flooded Kaziranga National Park. The Times of India reports on July 13th dozens of animals are believed to have died during the flooding. Assam's forest minister told Reuters that more than 90% of the national park is underwater. According to the International Business Times, the park is famous for saving one-horned rhinos on the brink of extinction. The park is home to the largest number of one-horned rhinos, with an estimated 2,500. Currently, efforts have started to help the rhinos and other wildlife in danger in the UNESCO World Heritage Site. During the flooding, animals sought higher ground, facing the risk of poachers and being hit by vehicles. Reuters reports floods in the Assam area in early July have killed at least 40 people and displaced nearly 1.5 million.
Well, a storm system that brought major flooding to the Midwest will impact tens of millions of people on the East Coast this morning. It already dumped several inches of rain from Missouri to Ohio. In Wisconsin, the Fox River crested yesterday at a record level. Rivers are still rising in Illinois and Ohio.
A new wave of thunderstorms tore through the Midwest overnight. The torrential rain was relentless and areas already covered in water. A view from above central Ohio shows the widespread damage there. A carnival, a high school football field, and several homes were immersed under inches of water.
It just wouldn't stop. You just keep saying, oh, please, just stop, stop.
One person had to be rescued after rushing water swept their vehicle away. In nearby Hebron, the heavy rain forced dozens of people to evacuate this mobile home park. First responders used boats to get them out.
It's flooded before, but nothing this severe. This is totally incredible.
And in Findlay, several city streets are closed because of high water. Some cars were left stranded. To the northwest, in Wisconsin, the Fox River reached record levels, cresting at more than 17 feet. That is 2 feet above the highest level recorded. House Speaker Paul Ryan returned to his home state to tour the areas devastated by the storm.
This happened so fast. It really, really happened so fast that so many people were caught off guard. So it's a real blessing that we did not have the kind of loss of life or injury that could have happened.
Yeah, second time we've done this in almost 7 years.
For some people in Lincolnshire, just north of Chicago, paddling was about the only way home.
We're going to pray that this is it. This is as high as it goes. Nobody else needs more water. It's done enough damage.
Back here in Findlay, Ohio, I noticed the window was open on the second story of a building here in downtown that was surrounded in water, and I yelled for the person to see if they were okay, and the guy said, yeah, I'm fine. His name was Robert. He said, I'm headed to work, and sure enough, a few minutes later, the door opened, and here came Robert with his bike over his shoulder. Nora, he said, I work in the plastics business, and he said, nobody pays my bills. Come hell or high water, he said, I'm on my way to work.
According to forecasters on Friday, fire crews combating dozens of wildfires across parched areas of the western United States will face tinderbox conditions that potentially could stoke more blazes throughout the weekend. Northern California, southern Oregon, northeastern Utah, and northern Montana are all under red flag warnings, with forecasters expecting temperatures to reach above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, as well as up to 50 miles per hour winds. The National Weather Service said very dry and unstable conditions will support extreme fire behavior and rapid rates of spread. The hot, dry forecast comes while firefighters have made gains in California on several blazes, including the so-called wall fire, which has already damaged or destroyed 44 homes in Butte County.
An attack in one of the holiest places of Jerusalem, near Lion's Gate, at the eastern entrance of the Old City. 3 gunmen opened fire just after 7 in the morning on Friday. Police forces chased after them.
All 3 terrorists were shot and killed. What we know is they were armed with an automatic weapon, with a Carl Gustav weapon, as well as knives, and they also attempted to stab a number of people here at the scene.
Israeli police closed off the area and said Friday prayers will not be held for Muslims at the Temple Mount or the Noble Sanctuary compound, which houses the Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Rock, and the Western Wall. Managed by Jordanian authorities, it is often the site of high tensions, but rarely the street attacks that have become commonplace elsewhere in Jerusalem. Since 2015, at least 255 Palestinians and 38 Israelis have been killed in attacks and clashes that in recent months had slowed but not stopped. Israel has blamed the violence on the Palestinian Authority, while they say the Palestinians that have attacked Israelis have done so simply out of desperation.
There have, over the past few years, been some closures of the Old City, but actually cancelling Friday prayers is so rare that someone at the Al-Aqsa Mosque said they thought that the last time it happened was in 1990. So we see all these things coming together today on this Friday, and they are sending shockwaves through Israel and, I have to say, through the Palestinian Authority.
And as you say, it is a significant attack given the location, because it is the most hotly contested piece of real estate in the Middle East, isn't it, Iris?
It is the most hotly contested piece of real estate, as you put it, and it's significant. It's much more significant than an attack on a bus in Jerusalem, which would affect the people involved and perhaps some Israelis and Palestinians. An attack at this holy site affects all Muslims worldwide. So that's 1.5 billion people who will be looking at that news and will feel affected by that news. And that is perhaps why we saw today the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, making a very rare call to Israel's Prime Minister, telling him he condemns the attack, that he condemns violence at a holy site like this, and asking Israel's Prime Minister to rescind the cancellation of the prayers, to allow the prayers to go ahead, and not to change the status quo at the mosque. What Israel's Prime Minister said is that he's not going to change the status quo after this Friday. That was what the indication that he gave. And he also asked the Palestinian president not to allow things to escalate, because there is a real fear here that it's a tinderbox. It's not only hotly contested. One thing goes wrong there and you see riots, and you often also see deaths. And they're very aware of that on both sides of the line here today.
The Trump administration is reportedly planning to recertify Iran's compliance with the historic deal to curb its nuclear program. Conservative opinion magazine The Weekly Standard was the first to report the news Thursday, citing 4 unnamed sources. A senior U.S. official later told Reuters that President Donald Trump is, quote, very likely to approve the recertification, but that official also said the president has reservations and could decide not to. The administration has until Monday to decide whether it will recertify Iran's adherence to the agreement, which lifts financial sanctions against the country as long as it proves it won't develop or acquire nuclear weapons. During his presidential campaign, Trump made his feelings on the agreement very clear.
Never, ever, ever in my life have I seen any transaction so incompetently negotiated as our deal with Iran. My number one priority is to dismantle the disastrous deal with Iran.
The worst deal I think I've ever seen negotiated that you started is the Iran deal. This is one of the worst deals ever made by any country in history.
But since taking office, Trump has yet to make good on his promise to pull the plug on the deal. The administration certified Iran's compliance for the first time in April.
It looks like the U.S. is going to be cutting about $10 billion worth of foreign aid, but it doesn't seem like Israel is going to be affected. U.S. President Donald Trump wants to cut $17 billion from the U.S. foreign aid budget to help pay for new expenditures, including his controversial wall between the United States and Mexico. But it looks like House Republicans aren't on board with all of his plans. They want to keep the $3 billion of yearly aid to Israel and $1.5 billion of aid to Egypt as is. Unlike economic aid, U.S. military aid typically acts as a gift card or line of credit to purchase U.S.-made arms and equipment from companies like Boeing and Lockheed Martin. So it essentially acts as a subsidy for the American arms industry. For Israel, it also acts as a source of funding for its missile defense programs, the Iron Dome short-range system, the medium-range David Sling, and the long-range Arrow defense system. The Iron Dome system, which mostly shoots down domestically produced Qassam rockets from the Gaza Strip, costs hundreds of millions of dollars a year to operate. Last year, the United States signed a $38 billion 10-year defense package to Israel, the largest ever aid agreement between the United States and any other country.
Egypt's Coptic Christians have been asked to suspend all events and activities outside churches for July amid a warning of possible militant attacks. Churches sources say the warning is issued to individual church leaders by a representative of the Coptic Orthodox Pope. About 100 Coptics, who make up the majority of Egyptian Christians, have been killed in attacks, some of them claimed by Daesh, since December. The last attack took place back in May when gunmen attacked a bus carrying Coptic Christians in the southern Minya province. Attack-feared terrorists have threatened more attacks against the Arab country's Christian minority. The Egyptian government is also currently battling a violent Daesh-led insurgency in the Sinai Peninsula.
Emmanuel Macron has presided over his first Bastille Day parade as French president. Watching the events as guest of honor, Donald Trump on the second day of his visit to Paris. The Trump-Macron handshake is becoming a familiar sight. Earlier, the US president tweeted, "Relationship with France stronger than ever." The ceremony on the Champs-Élysées featured French and American soldiers, marking 100 years since the US entered World War I. For France, the visit is a chance to boost its world standing. For the US, a respite from isolation over its leader's stance on trade and climate change. This week saw a row between Macron and his army chief over proposed defense cuts. But France will hope these scenes serve as a reminder that it's an important military power and partner of the US. A binational flypast was designed to symbolize the current military cooperation between the two countries.
They spoke in Paris, but their words are likely to have real implications thousands of miles away in Syria. Emmanuel Macron, the new leader of a country that had been one of the Syrian opposition's staunchest supporters, now making clear what he's hinted at before. Assad, in his view, is part of the solution in Syria.
Nous avons un objectif principal.
We have one main goal, which is to eradicate terrorism, no matter who they are. We want to build an inclusive and sustainable political solution. Against that background, I don't require President Assad's departure. This is no longer a prerequisite for France to work on that.
Today we face... At his side, President Trump talking of a ceasefire that came into force in southwest Syria on Sunday. It was negotiated at a meeting a week ago with Vladimir Putin, Assad's close ally. Trump made this optimistic prediction to reporters.
By having some communication and dialogue, we were able to have a ceasefire, and it's going to go on for a while. And frankly, we're working on a second ceasefire in a very rough part of Syria. And if we get that and a few more, all of a sudden you're going to have no bullets being fired in Syria, and that would be a wonderful thing.
U.S. military advisors are operating inside the city of Raqqa, the Islamic State last major stronghold in Syria, this according to a U.S. official in a first official statement on the matter. The troops, many of them special operation forces, are working in an advise, assist and accompany role to support local fighters from the Syrian Democratic Forces, this according to Colonel Ryan Dillon, a military spokesman. The troops are not in a direct combat role, but are calling in airstrikes and are working closely to fight than they did at the Iraqi side in Mosul.
Making sure that ISIL doesn't set up shop again might be just as hard as getting rid of it in the first place. And while everyone is celebrating the liberation of Mosul, a top U.S. commander in Iraq says to beware of ISIS 2.0.
If we're to keep ISIS 2.0 from emerging, the Iraqi government is going to have to do something pretty significantly different.
So what exactly should the Iraqi government do differently? Any advice?
I think the primary condition that caused the rise of ISIS was the fact that a significant portion of the Iraqi population, in this case the Sunnis, felt disaffected. The Iraqis have to make sure, after ISIS is defeated, that all Iraqis view the government in Baghdad as their government.
Now that ISIL's control of the city is over, there are concerns about what the future holds for Mosul. It was once an ethnically diverse city that was home to Sunni Arabs, Shia Turkmen, Kurds, Christians, Yazidis, among other minorities. But the western section, at least, is almost completely destroyed. Residents who have returned to the east of the city are afraid about their future under a Shia-led government which they accuse of neglecting them for years.
West Mosul will be the biggest problem that the Iraqi government will face. If the western half is ignored, it will create a social disaster and more destruction if not addressed. The central government should know that West Mosul has produced ISIL, and it's very possible that it may produce a newer version of it.
So sectarian violence is the main destabilizing factor. Now, didn't everything start to go wrong a few years back after a certain little military intervention? You know, Iraq invasion 1.0?
The consequence was that as we were trying to rehabilitate the country, those elements were trying to wreck our efforts by sectarian violence, and that is what we did not foresee.
So after reducing a formerly stable country to over a decade and a half of chaos, the USA now warns Baghdad that it better start building bridges and enforcing reconciliation. The USA, for its part, intends to stay.
The Iraqi government has expressed an interest in having the U.S. forces and coalition forces remain after the defeat of ISIS. Our government is equally interested in that, as are several coalition governments have expressed an interest in joining in that effort.
Another news, China has sent its Shan H-6 strategic bombers near Taiwan and Japan. They were sent on Thursday. It was part of a drill in the Western Pacific near Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone and the Miyako Strait south of Japan's Okinawa. This resulted in Japan reportedly carrying out a scramble order, but things didn't escalate as the Chinese jets didn't enter Japanese airspace.
France and Germany say they're to build a joint fighter jet as part of a drive to cement their countries' cooperation and strengthen the European Union. The announcement came as Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel met in Paris for the latest Franco-German cabinet meeting. The German Chancellor also said she was open to the idea of a single finance minister for the Eurozone. Both leaders vowed to deepen European integration on defence, counter-terrorism and immigration. The aim of this fighter jet for a new generation is first to launch a common research and development programme to be able to plan it together, and then for our two armies to be able to use it together. I confirm to you it is a profound revolution, but we're not afraid of revolutions.
C'est une révolution profonde. Mais nous n'avons pas peur des révolutions.
The German Chancellor was questioned about Macron's ideas for greater integration in the Eurozone that have brought suspicion in Berlin, particularly his proposal for a single finance minister, parliament and budget. Personally, I was always in favour. It was about how to create a European finance minister. In general, I'm not against a Euro budget. In 2012, I proposed a small Eurozone budget, but I failed big time back then. I'm very glad the idea is now back on the table. Both leaders are keen to revive the traditional Franco-German engine within the EU, but it'll be hard to act on key areas until after the German elections in September.
Everyone in America pretty much respects the U.S. military, and for good reason. They're amazing. Most taxpayers like to think that the money that the military spends goes to expenses like submarines and ammunition. Very few think of sex changes and transgender awareness training. On the other hand, it's 2017, and that means transgender recruitment is part of what the Pentagon does. The question is, will that help us win wars? So it's really simple. It's not a question of being for or against transgender people, I don't think. Right. It's a question of the Pentagon making decisions that make the services more effective in winning wars and defending the country. I don't think I should be in the military. I don't meet the standards, okay? So my simple question to you is, does the transgender policy make the military more effective in its core task?
No, it doesn't. Tucker, this policy is problematic for three reasons.
First, there are the obvious privacy concerns, but second, it elevates identity politics over combat preparation. And third, most importantly, it undermines readiness by removing objectivity from our military standards.
Okay, so
under this policy,
the second one, what does that mean? It elevates identity politics over combat readiness.
Well, let me explain. So the Army has very specific physical readiness requirements for male and female soldiers.
Yes.
Based on, like body fat, height and weight, but based on biological differences between males and females. Well, under this policy, a soldier can change their gender in the Army's personnel system without undergoing sex reassignment surgery or any other physical changes whatsoever. So in the Army,
so what are the criteria? As long as you say you've changed, you've changed?
If you have achieved stability in the preferred gender and change your birth certificate, then you are now a different gender. And for an example of how this plays into the readiness issue, an 18-year-old male soldier with 21% body fat is considered a liability and is non-deployable. An 18-year-old female soldier with 21% body fat is fit for duty. So if you have an 18-year-old soldier with 21% body fat and all of the characteristics of a male soldier, but identifies as female, he could be combat eligible when, under the female standard, when he otherwise would not be, or when the soldier otherwise would not be.
And all these people are fighting the same wars, right?
Sure thing.
Imagine sitting in a self-driving car that's about to crash into a crowd. The car has to choose between hitting everyone or running off the road, putting your life at risk. So how does it make that decision? For simple bots, Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics might help. But for more complex machines, researchers aren't so sure the 75-year-old set of rules will work. According to Asimov's laws, robots can't injure humans or allow them to be harmed. They have to obey orders humans give them, and they must protect themselves. But there's a caveat. If the laws conflict, the earlier law takes precedent. Single-function robots, something with a straightforward job, like a Roomba, could in theory follow those laws. But with some of the robots engineers are working on, like the US military's robot army, it gets complicated. Robots may not function properly, even if they're built to follow the laws. In one experiment, for example, researchers programmed a robot to save another bot if it got too close to a danger zone. Saving one robot was easy, but when 2 were in danger, the rescue bot got confused. In about 40% of trials, it couldn't decide which to save, and did nothing. So while Asimov's laws might help retain some order between humans and robots, it doesn't seem like our future will line up with his mostly subservient robots, at least for now. Researchers working with mice found a brain circuit that seems to lead to alpha mice. Activating these neurons increased a mouse's chance of making rivals yield, and might help explain how natural pecking orders and other hierarchies form. Scientists had mice butt heads in a tube and measured their brain activity while they pushed or retreated. When researchers suppressed specific neurons, mice were less likely to push or resist and more likely to retreat. When researchers used light to continuously stimulate the neurons, mice won a lot, even against opponents they lost to. And when researchers stopped using the light boost, the dominance effect persisted. If a mouse got enough assisted wins, they kept winning on their own. Scientists have known about this winner effect for years. Animals that triumph in a social dispute are more likely to win future showdowns. This helps the fittest individuals survive. If you win a fight over, say, food, your odds of snagging the best perch also improve. Identifying the brain circuitry associated with the winner effect might help us see how personality traits like stubbornness or competitiveness show up in the brain. Researchers suggest it might help us treat personality disorders in the future.
Медленно. Вот это да, вот это круто! О-хо-хо! Миша! Вот это да! Красота!